The Baltimore Ravens can take over the AFC this year. We talk about that, preview their week 1 game against the Houston Texans, and so much more coming up next here on this episode of Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of the Locked On Ravens podcast, for your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire, here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for being here, making us your first listen each and every day here on Locked On Ravens, free and available, as always, all podcasting platforms, including over in video form on YouTube. Today's episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by PrizePicks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. And welcome into a Purple Friday, a real Purple Friday. Every Friday, I guess, could be Purple Friday, but the real ones are when the Ravens have a game, whether it is Sunday, Monday, Thursdays wouldn't really count, but the Ravens have a regular season game, week 1 against the Houston Texans coming up. We'll be previewing that in the second part of the show and kind of going through our regular Friday routine, except we are going to switch it up a little bit. We're going to move the actual previews because we talk about the previews on Thursdays with Crossover Thursdays. I want to still get into like my own type of preview, and we have guests on, we'll do that as well. But I do want to do a big other story point in the first part of the show before moving into those previews. So today is going to be why the Ravens can own the AFC and take over the AFC this year. Then obviously we'll get into the Ravens-Texans preview, talking about Houston, who they added, and what it will look like against the Ravens, or at least what I think it will look like, and how the Ravens can get off to a strong start. As we kind of talked a little bit about yesterday. Then on the final part of the show, we're going to do Baltimore season predictions, but more so players. We've talked about records and playoffs and everything, but I haven't gotten too much into the actual players, so we'll get into that in the final part of the show here. There's a lot to get into today, but I did promise a special announcement, so I'll do that in the first part, and I'll remind people in the third part. We're starting up on subtext. It's out. I will put the link to the subtext in the description below. What it's going to be is essentially exclusive content for me. We're going to move mailbags over to subtext. It'll be text, because essentially what it is it's a text from me. I put it out to everyone, but it's a text that you get from me. It comes straight to your phone, and we can have conversations on those texts. Sometimes on Twitter, either you're not on Twitter to see news, I would give you that news in a text, or it'll be just stuff I'm thinking about, either whether it's offseason moves, game tweets. I'll be tweeting out stuff on Twitter, but also I'll be putting it in subtext text. So if you want to support me, support my work, support the show, I'll put the link down there. You can sign up for that. It is a small amount, but it would go a long way. So I know we're going to gain some subscribers and do some stuff with that as well. So just a little nice added thing where it's more of a way for me to engage with people, because I love engaging with the listeners and the watchers who go so far to watch my content. It means a lot to me. But again, on Twitter, I don't ignore people. It's just hard for me to go through every single thing and respond every single time. This will give me more one-on-one time. If you do choose to subscribe to the subtext, it'll give me more one-on-one time for us to have actual conversations instead of getting lost in the notifications that I get on a daily basis. So I'll explain more in the third part of the show and over the course of the next couple months, and we're going to keep it going. So it'll be exciting, but that was the announcement. So if you want to subscribe to that, again, link will be in the channel notes below. I'll put out a tweet on Twitter. If you want to go there, click on the link, sign up. You'll get exclusive text from me, and we can have conversations and a bunch more content as well, as I mentioned, such as mailbags. But enough of that. Let's get into why the Ravens can own the AFC. There's a lot to like about the Ravens this season. We've kind of talked about it on preview shows throughout the course of this week and the past couple of months. And I think the Ravens have as good of a shot as anybody. And look, we saw the opening game of the NFL season happen last night. The Kansas City Chiefs actually fell to the Detroit Lions in a game that many people expected the Lions to not win, the Chiefs to come in on their Super Bowl night and go out there and beat the Lions. But the Lions played upset. Now, I think I don't think we should overreact, right? The Chiefs did not have Travis Kelce. Chris Jones also was not on the field for the Chiefs. So that's a different Chiefs team. But the Chiefs wide receivers out there were looking like wide receiver rooms of Ravens past. I tweeted out the graphic of the top 4 wide receivers once everybody got injured last year. DeMarcus Robinson, Deshaun Jackson, Sammy Watkins, James Prochet. And DeMarcus Robinson had some moments, but in reality, it's hard for any quarterback to go out there and win without multiple threats. Kansas City has Travis Kelce. The Ravens had Mark Andrews. And it's not a conversation about where we'll rank those guys. That's a different conversation. I have Kelce 1, Andrews 2. But I think that for what Baltimore is right now, they have a better wide receiver group than the Chiefs by a long margin. And I think that it's just depth up and down, because you look at who the top teams in the AFC should be. Should be Kansas City, should be Cincinnati, who, by the way, just signed Joe Burrow to a massive contract extension. So Jalen Hurts gets his, Lamar gets his, Justin Herbert gets his, Joe Burrow gets his. Crazy offseason for quarterbacks. But also Buffalo in that conversation as well. Those are my top 4. I think that the Ravens have a lot of questions, as do any other team, but I think those questions can be answered pretty easily. Like, I don't think it's going to take a ton for the Ravens to answer most of their questions. The glaring ones we talked about earlier in the week, I would probably say, is the pass rush in the corner room. But other than that, it's like, oh, well, what's the Todd Monken offense going to look like? How is Lamar Jackson going to look with a free idea of what the offense can be and a free idea of what he wants to do and actually executing that? That, to me, that stuff is going to be, oh, we're going to have to wait a couple weeks or a month or however long it takes. I wouldn't expect it to be super long to get everybody fully acclimated. But I feel like Lamar's going to thrive in this offense. I feel like Odell Beckham is going to also thrive. And he, by the way, was added to the injury report with an ankle injury. I don't think there's too much to look into that with. He himself, I think, took to Twitter and did a little subtweeting. And so I'm not worried about that. But to me, I think the Chiefs have some questions in terms of defensive consistency and offensive. I don't want to say efficiency, because Patrick Mahomes, I mean, look, we have to respect him. He, in my opinion, is the best quarterback in the NFL. And I think that while Lamar is great, Jalen Hurts is great, Joe Burrow is great, Josh Allen is great, we have to give respect to what Patrick Mahomes has done. To me, though, the Chiefs have a couple questions. The Bengals, I think they are a team that the offense, we know what it is, but they have a couple of, how is the new offensive line going to look? You know, year 2 of Ted Karras in there kind of anchoring the line. And obviously that they brought in a couple other pieces, namely Orlando Brown Jr., who they brought over from Kansas City. But I still think that on the defensive side of the ball, without Jesse Bates there, they're starting 2 new safeties without Jesse Bates and Von Bell. How is that going to look? And their pass rush outside of Trey Hendrickson, can Joseph Ossai take another leap? Hendrickson's great, but what about that? On the interior for them, CJ Reader's a beast. He's one of my favorite interior defensive linemen. But who else? It's almost like a who else thing. I think the Bengals have a really solid inside linebacker group with Logan Wilson and Jermaine Pratt. Corner-wise, they're going to be relying on Cam Taylor-Britt, obviously Jadobe Awuzie. So I think Cincinnati has less questions. And you look at Buffalo, and I think they have the least questions. For them, it's just like, what's been going on? It feels like they should have been going further than they have. They haven't really had a ton of crazy injuries. I know Von Miller had his thing, and that's huge. I guess last year, actually, I take that back, because last year Jordan Poyer missed time, Micah Hyde missed time, Tre'Davious White missed it. So I take that back about the injury on the defensive side of the ball. Excuse me for that. But I think with the way that the Bills are, there's always Stephon Diggs drop. Like, it's weird that they haven't gone further than they have. Maybe a fully healthy season, once Von Miller comes back. I know Micah Hyde's dealing with something. It just feels like, to me, Baltimore has the least amount of questions. Not saying, again, they don't have any, but I feel like I put Baltimore up against Kansas City and Cincinnati and Buffalo, and I feel pretty good. Like, I'm not saying it's 40-point blowouts, but I feel pretty good overall. I'd probably say if Baltimore had to play those 3 teams back to back to back, I'd probably say they'd go 2-1. I think they'd probably beat – who do I think they'd beat? I think they beat Cincinnati, because I have Baltimore sweeping Cincinnati actually this season. I think the Ravens have almost built their defense for them. But I would – out of Kansas City and Buffalo, I'll say they beat Kansas City. I'll say they beat Kansas City, because I feel like the Chiefs' weird wide receiver room and the Ravens' weird corner room kind of are a push. Like, they kind of push out each other. So then it's like, all right, Travis Kelce and Mark Andrews are going to eat against, both defenses. But I feel like the Ravens' defense is better than Kansas City's. And I feel like the Ravens' offense, even though Patrick Mahomes is over there, and Travis Kelce is over there, it's a who else thing. The Ravens have had to deal with that question, by the way, where I saw all the tweets and the statuses about, oh, well, Patrick Mahomes has no one to throw to, and poor Patrick Mahomes, and Mahomes needs help. But when Lamar had it for 4 seasons before this, it was, oh, well, it's Lamar's fault. Lamar has to do this. It doesn't matter who he's throwing to, but it matters who Mahomes is throwing to, right? So it's ridiculous, first of all. But I would say the Ravens have a shot here. I think they can definitely own the AFC this season. I'm not saying they're going to go 17-0. I'm not saying they're going to have this crazy record, but I think when it comes to a very talented conference, one team's going to have to be the number 1 seed. One team's going to have a great year and then, maybe have a really good record. We're going to see probably a lot of those 13, 12, 11, 10-win teams, but I feel like the Ravens with their schedule this season, they're not playing a gauntlet first-place schedule. I think they have a shot to go out there and do really well in a conference that's going to be uber competitive this season. Coming up in the second part of the show, though, we'll be diving into our Ravens and Texans preview, talking about Houston, who they've added, how they match up with the Ravens, and obviously how the Ravens match up with Houston. So be sure to stay tuned. Plan to get to on Locked On Ravens. But first, this episode is brought to you by Nutrafol, and you don't have to choose between better hair growth and your health. I know some people feel like they have to. Nutrafol provides a whole body health approach for men that promotes healthier hair. There's no drugs, no compromises, just better hair. And sometimes men do think losing their hair is inevitable and it's just going to come one day and there's nothing they can do to stop it. But you can take control of your hair's future with Nutrafol's science-backed hair growth supplement for men. Did you know 80% of men will experience hair thinning in their lifetime? It is normal, but it doesn't have to be your fate. You can get ahead of thinning with Nutrafol. And if you're tired of weakening or thinning hair, do you want to reach your full hair potential? Leading hair growth supplement Nutrafol helps you improve your hair growth, visible thickness, and a visible scalp coverage. Nutrafol is the #1 dermatologist recommended hair growth supplement, clinically shown to improve your hair growth, visible thickness, and visible scalp coverage. Nutrafol's hair growth supplements use physician-formulated natural science-backed ingredients. And go to Nutrafol.com/men to take their hair health wellness quiz. Identify causes of your thinning hair, and Nutrafol will give you a personalized plan for better hair health through whole body wellness. Nutrafol supports healthy hair growth from within by targeting root causes of thinning such as stress, hormones, environment, nutrition, lifestyle, and metabolism through whole body health. And it works. In a clinical study, 84% of men showed improvement in their hair after 6 months taking Nutrafol's men hair growth supplements. Take the first step to visibly thicker, healthier hair. For a limited time, Nutrafol is offering our listeners $10 off your first month subscription and free shipping when you go to Nutrafol.com/man and enter the promo code LOCKEDONNFL. Find out why over 4,000 healthcare professionals recommend Nutrafol for healthier hair. Nutrafol.com/man, spelled Nutrafol.com/man, and enter promo code LOCKEDONNFL. That's Nutrafol.com/man, promo code LOCKEDONNFL. We're back here, our second segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher still here with you, talking Ravens football, and the Ravens will go up against the Houston Texans in week 1. It is Purple Friday, as I talked about, a real one, because they have a football game to play. And I think for a lot of people, this is a game on the Ravens calendar, on their schedule, that penciled in as a win for a lot of people. But we should still preview it, because not every game is going to be easy, and there's no easy win in the NFL. And I'm not saying, oh yeah, the Ravens 100% are going to do this or that, because I don't want to get burned. Like, anything can happen in this league. The Ravens know that. They got to go out there and play hard, but maybe compared to some of their other matchups this season, this one might look like one of the easier ones. Now, Houston is one of 2 teams for me who are not going to be in AFC playoff contention this year. They're Super Bowl contenders, they're playoff contenders in terms of maybe wild card spots and whatnot. But for Houston, I think that, look, they're built. I think they're building something, but they're going to need a few years to build it. I don't think this is the year. They're going to be starting CJ Stroud, a rookie quarterback who we know the Ravens history. We talked about it yesterday with Cody Davis of Locked On Texans for Crossover Thursday. So for a much more immersive preview and a deep one, go into that episode from yesterday. But for this one, I mean, look, we know what happens with the Ravens and rookie quarterbacks. For the most part, it is very hard for them to, I mean, this is CJ Stroud's first start. He has had no regular season NFL experience. He's going to have a very interesting introduction to the NFL here, because while obviously Don Martindale was known for the blitzes and getting all these confused looks up at the line and either sending 9 or dropping everybody but 3, Mike Macdonald still is aggressive in his own right. And I think the positional players, the veterans on this roster, they're going to be playing. I don't expect Marlon Humphrey to play. I don't think anybody is. We'll look at the injury report today and see. But I mean, Marcus Williams and Roquan Smith and some of those other players, Jadeveon Clowney, even a former #1 overall pick of Houston, those guys are all going to have to get in CJ Stroud's head. One of the keys for me in this game is to make CJ Stroud uncomfortable, as any team should be looking to make any young quarterback, because if he gets in a rhythm, he can use that confidence and might elevate his game in that game in particular. Now, Houston, in terms of what they have right now and what they added in the offseason besides CJ Stroud, they traded. It was a very interesting trade. I liked it for them. They took Will Anderson, the edge from Alabama. He's going to wreak some havoc in the NFL. Again, I don't know what it's going to be like this week, whether he lines up against Ronnie Stanley or he gets Morgan Moses. I'm not sure yet where they're going to put him, but I expect him to make some noise here. The other stuff they did in the offseason was they traded for Shaq Mason. They signed Sheldon Rankins, Jimmy Ward, and also they ended up trading away Brandon Cooks. They have Devin Singletary and Dalton Schultz now, so a couple of offensive weapons there too. But they are also dealing with a ton of injuries right now. They have a bunch of injuries to their offensive line. If the Ravens do not get consistent pressure, we've talked about this all offseason for multiple seasons, the Ravens have had struggles with generating pressure without blitzing. If Justin Madubuike and Broderick Washington and Ndafe Owe and David Ajabo, Jadeveon Clowney, if the Ravens cannot get front four pressure with what I think is going to be mostly a second string offensive line for Houston, it's already going to be an issue. And people will say, well, it's just week one. It's just week one. Sure, I get it. But that's going to be a huge issue if that can't happen. Now, in terms of what Houston did last year, I don't think this has a ton of weight because it's pretty much a completely different team. D'Amico Ryan's come in as the head coach. They have a bunch of new offensive weapons there. It's a whole new offense, basically. They were second to last in the league in rushing last year, averaged 3.7 yards per carry, and they were 28th in the league in passing last year, averaging 5.4 net yards per attempt. Again, it's a different offense. I expect them to have better numbers than that against the Ravens and any other team. But a key for me also is making the Texans one-dimensional. Take away the run game. Don't let them get a rhythm in the run and force CJ Stroud to throw the ball. And part of that on the offensive side of the ball is, hey, go out there and score points. And for the Ravens offense, it's being within yourself early, kind of figuring out what's going right, what's going wrong. Lamar, all those guys, Odell, they haven't played in the preseason together. It was pretty much the joint practices, and that was it. So I think for what Baltimore has, they match up really well with Houston. I think some areas where you're going to have to look and see is, Derek Stingley Jr. is a heck of a player out there. They do have a couple of safeties that can do some work. I mean, Jimmy Ward, we don't know if he's going to play yet. I think there's an injury with him. But the Texans are just so banged up right now. I expect the Ravens to go out there and win this game. Again, I don't think it's going to be super easy, although we do know the week one Ravens, week one Lamar Jackson go crazy sometimes. So could be like a 40-10 win, but I'm expecting my final prediction is 34-20 Ravens. I think that it could maybe be 34-14, but I think that's a fine. Again, you only win by 1, win by 30. It doesn't matter as long as you win the game. That's what's that. I think there would be some overreactions if the Ravens and the Texans, it was a 1-point game and the Ravens just squeaked it out. But coming up in the final part of the show, we're diving into season predictions, Lamar, some of the players. We'll do a couple of team ones too. So be sure to stay tuned. A lot to get to on Locked On Ravens. But first, this episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. And if you like daily fantasy sports, you got to check out PrizePicks. It's the most fun I've had, winning up to 25 times my money this football season. All you have to do, select 2 or more players, pick more or less on their projected stats, and place your entry. And it's really exciting, too. It's the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. If you have the skills, you can turn $10 into $250 with just a few taps. It's also really simple to play. You can make your picks and submit your entries in less than 60 seconds as well. So this week on PrizePicks, there are a lot of really good things you can select from. For example, I like Saquon Barkley for more than 60 yards and Aaron Rodgers more than 3 passing touchdowns against that Bills defense, and Justin Jefferson, maybe he struggles a little bit in week 1, under 100 receiving yards there, and Lamar Jackson for more than 1 passing touchdowns, and Odell Beckham Jr. as well, more than 50 yards there too. PrizePicks also offers weekly promotions that lead to big payouts, like on Tacos Tuesday. Each Tuesday, PrizePicks discounts select player projections up to 25% to provide even more value. And I love PrizePicks. Go over there to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. Daily fantasy sports made easy. We're back here. It's our final segment of Locked On Ravens, Purple Friday edition. Kevin Oestreicher still here with you again. We are a 5-day-a-week Ravens podcast, Monday through Friday. Also, We're going to do some live streaming on Sunday after every Ravens game. So Thursday night, Sunday night, Monday night, Sunday afternoon, we'll have it here for you. Live stream on Locked On Ravens. Also, after any big news that happens, we do live streams. We'll turn notifications on for that. And as I mentioned in the first segment, the big announcement, we're going to subtext. So it's a conversation between you and me. It's a personalized thing. I'll send out texts as well to everybody, my thoughts, just stats and news, because sometimes you're not on Twitter to see the stats. You're not on your, the notifications don't pop up for a Bleacher Report or something or along those lines. So for me, it's a text that you get right to your phone, and I'll provide those updates. Also exclusive stuff like mailbags where I'll put out links to that. So if you want to support my work, support the channel, support the show, and just support me in general, it's I greatly appreciate it. I'll put the link in the description below. Also, I'll put out a tweet that I'll pin on my profile. You can find the link over there as well and see if you're interested. So I appreciate you if you do end up doing that. And I appreciate everybody for listening in general, audio form, video form, the same show either way. So if you're a YouTube watcher or an audio listener, thank you for tuning in today. And we made it, right? It's the last show before an actual game, unless something crazy happens and I have to live stream on Friday or Saturday. We'll be back here on Sunday, though, live streaming. You can come in, share your thoughts on the game, share your thoughts on what the Ravens did, what they didn't do, what you liked, what you didn't. So that's another area, or at least an avenue to interact with the show, the channel, and myself. But let's get into some season predictions for the Ravens here. I think it's interesting because, as we've talked about all week, pretty much, this has been pretty much a prediction week for the most part. I think a lot of it has to do with, what's the offense going to be and how's Lamar going to do? I think let's start with actual team projections for what the Ravens will do, what the splits will be. I think this is going to be a team that it's going to be more pass heavy this season, but I think it's going to be right around the 63-37 mark in terms of pass versus run. I could see is 61-39. I think it's going to be more of a split. I think what people have wanted for so long is just balance and more balance within the offense in general. It was just run. And then when stuff started working, Greg Roman will go away from it. I think just the continuity, rolling with what's hot, all of that I think Todd Monken's going to do. And part of that is just mixing it up, keeping the defense on their toes. I think the Ravens offense got really predictable. Lamar Jackson essentially said as such a couple years ago in an interview with NFL Network. So I'm expecting, right around that 63-37, maybe 61-39, maybe a 65-35, but I don't think it's going to be some crazy 70-30 split or 80-20 or something like that. I think that'd be pretty crazy if it happened. But in terms of Lamar, it's interesting to talk about what he can do this year with an improved offensive weapon group, with just what he can do himself as a rusher, not to mention what he can do as a passer. He can do both very well. But for Lamar last year, he ended up it wasn't seen him play a full season, obviously. He ended up only playing in 12 games, but threw for 17 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, 203 for 326. And that was last year with the Ravens ranking 28th in pass attempts with 48. I expect Lamar's pass attempts to be more so up towards 650, 700 this year. Because again, remember, the Ravens 488 pass attempts as a whole, and this is assuming everyone's healthy. I think Lamar right around 650, 700, maybe 600, right? That's where I think you could be, maybe on the very low end, 550. But I think Lamar last year compared to this year, 2,242 yards. I'd expect that more up to 3,500. I'll give him 29 passing touchdowns compared to 8 interceptions. And I will go 880 rushing yards with an extra 7 rushing touchdowns for him. Last year, for the rushing wise, it was 764 and 3. So I think he'll have more rushing touchdowns as a whole. I think there'll be more opportunities for the offense. But, again, in 17 games compared to his 12 games, in 17 games, he rushed for 764, or in 12 games, he rushed for 764. So in 17, right around 880. I think that's fair, especially with the downtick in rushes. JK, on the other hand, only played in 8 games, had 92 attempts for 520 yards. I expect JK's carries to be up in that 150, 160 range. I'll give him 1,100 yards and 7 touchdowns. I'll go 7 for Gus Edwards. I'd probably have him in the 120 range. I think it's going to be more of a J.K. Dobbins backfield. 110, 120 for Gus Edwards. for maybe 500 yards and 4 touchdowns for Gus Edwards. Receiving wise, I think Odell Beckham Jr. has maybe right. And again, let's look at the catches for last year. The Ravens wide receivers, leading wide receiver catch guy was Demarcus Robinson with 48. I expect Odell to have, I'm going to say Odell has 95 catches for 1,050 yards and 7 touchdowns. I'm going to say Rashad Bateman has 80 catches. Yeah, 80 catches for 700 yards and 6 touchdowns. I'm going to say Zay Flowers has 75 catches for right around 650 or 700 yards with 6 touchdowns himself. So that's the big 3 there. Mark Andrews, I'm expecting about 900 yards from him and maybe 8 touchdowns. I think the volume will go down, but the efficiency will remain the same or go up there. And then defensively, I'd expect Roquan Smith to have maybe 120 tackles. Patrick Queen played in all 70 games. He had 117. I'd expect him to be right around 95, 100. Chuck Clark was the Ravens' second leading tackler last year, actually. So there's more tackles to be made up. I'd say Marlon Humphrey, if, depending on timeline, maybe for him right around 70, 75 tackles, 1 or 2 interceptions, 3 forced fumbles. I'll say Marcus Williams has 6 interceptions this year. Kyle Hamilton has 5. Odafe Owe, my bold prediction was he has 10-plus sacks. I'll say he has 7 this year. Jadeveon Clowney, I'll say, has 5, but is a very good run stuffer. On the interior, Justin Madubuike has 6. Broderick Washington, maybe 4.5. So there are a lot of players that can step up for them this season, and I'm excited to see who actually ends up doing it, because when you talk about the offense, it's more, this veteran there and that veteran there. It seems like there are more sure things. But on the defensive side of the ball, for example, like what's Rock Ya-Sin going to be? And what's Ronald Darby going to be? How's Jalen Armour-Davis going to fare? And, for those younger guys like Travis Jones and David Ajabo, are they going to step up? What's Brandon Stevens going to be this season? There's a lot to like about the Ravens. Still certainly plenty of question marks, but that's kind of where I have guys. And if you have your own that you'd like to put below, on the YouTube comments, or you can find me on Twitter or subtext as well, you can give those to me and I'll react to them for sure. But I appreciate everybody tuning in today. That's all I have for you here on Locked on Ravens. Be sure to subscribe if you want to subscribe to the subtext. That's really awesome as well. I'm not going to sound out any text until someone subscribes, so then it'd be going into the void. But if you want to subscribe to that, I greatly appreciate you doing so. When we get back here, it'll be on Sunday, right after the game here, maybe a couple, 30 minutes, an hour after. We'll be doing an instant reaction episode to the Ravens, either win, loss, or tie. Hopefully win. I predict they're going to win 34-20. So whatever happens, we're going to be reacting to it here live on this channel. Then obviously we'll have the regular show for Monday coming out. So a ton of Ravens content. Football's back. We made it. No Lamar Jackson conversation is in Baltimore for the next 5 seasons. And we'll hopefully be tearing it up in week 1. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'll see you right back here on Sunday on Locked on Ravens.